Hi guys, it's me, ChazzaHD, and welcome back to the channel and welcome back to the 2026 Formula 1 season as we are here for the Miami Grand Prix weekend, the fourth race weekend of the 2026 season. Finally, F1 is back. 5 weeks it's been since the last race in Japan. And yeah, we are finally back for Formula 1 in 2026, and much has changed in that 5 weeks. Especially, if you've been watching some of the action so far in Miami, sprint qualifying yesterday and the sprint race earlier, you will see that the pecking order is much different now than it was 5 weeks ago. And it really does feel like Formula 1 in 2026 has come alive. And it really needed to. And thankfully, it has. And we'll get into more so why that is, in this stream and in the build-up. Of course, to qualifying, which is what we are going to be covering in this stream. Obviously, qualifying getting underway in just under an hour and a half from now. And hopefully be an exciting session in Miami. And normally, the battle for pole position here does tend to be pretty exciting. So I'm expecting a good session. And it should be a very competitive fight for pole position between several drivers and several different teams. But yeah, good to be back. First, obviously, live stream I've done in 5 weeks, so it does feel a bit weird, I'll be honest, to be doing a live stream. But yeah, here we are back, thankfully, for 2026, for the 2026 Formula 1 season. And yeah, qualifying hopefully will give us something to get really excited about, not just for the rest of the weekend, but really just going forward for the rest of the season, because we do need Formula 1 to really pick up, and it looks as though we might be having that after what we've seen so far this weekend. But I hope all you guys are well, no matter, obviously, what time zone you're in, part of the world you're from. Hope you're all doing as well as possible, given whatever circumstances you're going through. And I hope, as well, that you've had a good last 5 weeks. And obviously, the month of April, we had no Formula 1. Hope you had a good month of April and did some great stuff. Had some great experiences, no matter what you were doing. And yeah, hope you're all well ahead of this qualifying session in Miami. And of course, in this qualifying watch-along, we will be going through the usual stuff that we do in the build-up to qualifying session. We'll be going through the data from yesterday's sprint qualifying to really understand what the pecking order is this weekend, and to best judge where certain teams are at, and then obviously to make our own predictions as to what is going to happen in qualifying in a couple hours' time. As we'll obviously go through that soon, and I'll go through all the teams and give an update as to how they're all getting on so far. Obviously, a lot of teams have brought a lot of upgrades this weekend. That's why, especially towards the front of the field, the pecking order has changed quite a bit. So we'll be getting into all of that in the build-up to qualifying, and then in just over an hour and 20 minutes, the session will begin, and we will take you through what happens in qualifying. But another thing we will touch on in a moment, and it'll be the first thing actually we touch on, is of course what happened in the sprint race, which took place, what was it, a couple hours ago? I think it was. Yeah, I think it finished about a couple hours ago. So we will go through, what happened, what the results are, and I will take you through the championship standings, as they are slightly different in terms of position compared to what they were like, obviously, beforehand. So, yeah, we'll get into that in a moment. Before, as well, we go any further, just want to let you guys know, of course, as usual, there's a poll running in the chat where I've asked you guys, who do you think, out of the 4 options I've put in that poll, who do you think will take pole position for the Miami Grand Prix? Will it be Lando Norris, who, spoiler alert, won the sprint race? Or will it be Charles Leclerc, who has taken pole position here before? Or will it be any of the two Mercedes drivers, Kimi Antonelli and George Russell? Let me know. Out of those 4 drivers, who do you think is most likely to get pole? If you don't think any of them are going to get pole and you think it's going to be someone else, say like Piastri or Hamilton or even Max Verstappen, make sure to post your comment, saying that is your prediction in the chat, and I'll make sure to read out as many predictions as I can in the build-up to the session. But yeah, that poll will keep running for the next couple hours until the start of Q3, and then we'll see who you guys have voted for as most likely to take pole position for the Miami Grand Prix. But yeah, good to see you all, and I think we'll just pretty much get straight into it as well. Hello to Brooks in the chat. Good to see you after obviously the long break we've had. But yeah, let's get into, firstly, before we get into looking at qualifying and looking at the sprint qualifying data from yesterday, which gives us a really good, I think, preview of what probably will happen in this session today. Let's just touch on the sprint race. So, of course, in the sprint race, only the top 8 can score points. And, Lando Norris won the sprint from Oscar Piastri second, 1-2 for McLaren. And McLaren were genuinely the fastest team in the sprint. McLaren are back, without a doubt. Are they as quick compared to the rest of the field as they were last year? Probably not, but they are definitely back to being a race contending, winning, and I think title contending possibly team. They are looking very, very good. So yeah, it was a McLaren 1-2. Third was Charles Leclerc. Good drive from him. Fourth, George Russell. On track though, Kimi Antonelli finished in 4th, but was given a 5-second penalty for exceeding track limits too many times. So Russell ended up finishing 4th. Max Verstappen finished 5th, and Verstappen was right behind Russell at the end of that sprint. The Red Bull has improved a lot since the last Grand Prix in Japan. We're really good to see. Max has even come out and said that he believes that Red Bull have halved the deficit between themselves and whoever the quickest team is, and that is, I think, pretty clear to see from the running so far. So yeah, good to see. Red Bull much more back in the action. And then, yeah, Antonelli, who is the championship leader, ended up finishing in 6th. Lewis Hamilton 7th. Hamilton had a pretty poor sprint race. Had a poor weekend as well. And then 8th was Pierre Gasly. Alpine have been very quick this weekend, and Alpine look like they are by far the fastest midfield team. So, yeah, Gasly getting a point there. Good for him and good for the Alpine team. So, now that the sprint race is done, let's look at how that affects the championship standing, starting with the Drivers' Championship. Kimi Antonelli losing a couple points to his teammates, so the gap is 7 points in Antonelli's favour going into the rest of the weekend. Russell in 2nd, Leclerc 3rd. Leclerc now only 20 points off the championship lead, and given how quick Ferrari now look, especially compared to Mercedes, I think you'd have to say at this point, Charles Leclerc is a championship contender. Obviously, how the rest of the weekend goes, will determine whether Leclerc can really get after the two Mercedes drivers in the championship, pretty soon. But if he can finish Leclerc ahead of both Mercedes cars in the race tomorrow, which I think is looking honestly pretty likely given how quick Ferrari look, Leclerc, like I said, he's absolutely a championship contender. Lewis Hamilton in 4th, 10 points clear of Lando Norris in 5th, who is really starting to close the gap to the cars ahead, or the drivers ahead. Oscar Piastri only 5 points behind in 6th. Oliver Behrman still 7th. Pierre Gasly a point closer in 8th. Max Verstappen level on points with Gasly, but Max is in 9th. And then still P10 in the championship. Liam Lawson, Racing Bulls, obviously started the season really well. So far, though, here in Miami, Racing Bulls have been pretty slow. So don't be expecting them to score points this weekend. On the constructors' side, Mercedes still comfortably for now clear of Ferrari, who are, 45 points behind. So it's not a massive gap at this point, but it's comfortable enough for the Mercedes team. Ferrari comfortably in second, McLaren very comfortably third, but closing the gap to the two teams ahead. Red Bull now up to fourth, a couple points clear of Haas, and Alpine 1 point behind Haas. Alpine, though, I'm pretty confident are going to overtake Haas in the championship by the end of this weekend, because Alpine look like they're quick enough probably to get both cars into the top 10. Not only for qualifying today, but probably the race tomorrow. So, yeah, I'd be pretty shocked if Alpine were not in the top 5 of the championship by the end of this Miami Grand Prix weekend. Racing Bulls then in 7th, pretty comfortably 7th, and then Audi in 8th, Williams in 9th, Cadillac 10th, and Aston Martin at the very back of the Constructors' Championship. Now, if we just go back here, I won't put the countdown back on screen because I'm going to come away from this screen in a moment anyway. One thing I do want to quickly get into is, of course, there has been changes made to these engines and these cars since the last Grand Prix. Of course, I made a video about a month ago talking about the problems with these cars and the changes that needed to be made to make these cars, for the drivers, more enjoyable to drive, make the overtaking less artificial, and make it less dangerous in terms of the closing speed difference between the two, the different cars on track. They have made some changes. So basically, in simple terms, the ICE, the internal combustion engine, is now more so responsible for the power, say, delivery than it was before. It's not a 50-50 split between the battery and the ICE like it was in the first 3 races. Now it's more so towards the ICE. I think it's more like 60-40 or 65-35. And it has limited quite a bit the super clipping that we were talking about so much in the first 3 races. It's still happening, but it is not happening anywhere near as badly, which is really good to see. But there is still work to be done because it is still happening. I still think that they could probably go a bit more towards, in terms of the, the domination of the power. I think it still could be a bit more in the ICE's favor. Maybe another 5%, 10% to get it absolutely right. But yeah, a big step in the right direction. And even though, again, it's not absolutely where it should be and there's still work to be done, it is a lot better than what we had previously. So that is really good to see. And it doesn't seem as though the drivers are complaining as much about these cars so far this weekend as like they were in the first 3 races and during testing as well. So the drivers seem, I won't say totally happy with it, but they are a lot happier with these cars in terms of the changes they've made to the power units and the delivery of how much the battery delivers and all of that stuff. So that is really good to see. And we'll see if there's any further changes that are needed later in the season, but at least for this weekend, it seems as though it is working in, just making the cars more how they should be and more so normal rather than just really artificial and just terrible like they were in the first 3 races. So that is really good to see. I just wanted to update you guys essentially about that because it was something that needed to be done, and thankfully they've made some changes, which again, it's at least, even if you might not still be happy about it, it is at least in the right direction. So that is, great to see. Anyway, let's get into the sprint qualifying results of yesterday to understand what is probably going to happen in this session. So Lando Norris took pole position, and really that's why a big reason why he was able to win the sprint race so easily was because he was on pole. And it is so hard to overtake at this Miami circuit. So if you do get pole and you're able to lead through the first couple corners, it's really difficult to, to stop whoever's in the lead from winning because, again, of how difficult it is to follow and overtake in general. Antonelli, couple tenths behind in second. Mercedes have been, at least this weekend, overtaken by McLaren, and I would even say Ferrari. And I think the sprint race proves that to an extent, that McLaren and Ferrari, at least this weekend, are faster than Mercedes. The evidence is clear. Now, why that is the case, we'll talk more about that in a moment, but one thing I do want to say is, with Leclerc in 4th and Hamilton in 7th, a disappointing result that was for Ferrari, but that was not the true potential of what they could have done in qualifying yesterday, or sprint qualifying yesterday. Leclerc in SQ1 did a 120, what was it, a 128.7, I think it was, which was pretty quick at that part of sprint qualifying. He only improved by a few tenths of a second down to a 128.1. So I don't think they found as much performance in the final part of sprint qualifying compared to others. And I think that's really a big reason why they didn't have as great of a result in the end, is because they didn't find or tap into the true potential that the Ferrari car, I think, genuinely does have around this track. That Ferrari car is fast enough to get pole position. I don't have any doubts about that. Whether it's quick enough to absolutely get pole, we'll have to see. But it is definitely in contention. I have no doubt about that, especially in the hands of Charles Leclerc, who, again, has taken pole here before and is a real maestro in qualifying. But if you were disappointed with Ferrari's efforts yesterday, again, that was not the true, showing of what Ferrari's pace is. They have got more pace than that, no doubt. Then you had Max Verstappen in 5th. Red Bull have improved a lot. Like Max said, they think they've halved the gap to the quickest team, whoever the quickest team is, and this weekend, so at least so far, looks like it's probably McLaren or Ferrari, very close there as well. Red Bull much more with it and a lot closer to where they should be, which is great to see. George Russell 6th. Russell has been pretty poor this weekend, and I think mentally just not in great shape at the minute, in terms of the momentum has been really against him since that second race of the season in Shanghai, and he just hasn't been able to get things going back in his direction, at least compared, in the fight with his own teammate Antonelli. And that's really because he's not been able to get rid of this negative momentum. It's just getting worse race by race. No reason for him to be down in 6th place. Absolutely no reason for that. He should have been, yesterday in sprint qualifying, he should have been 4th at worst. 6th is absolutely terrible. And even though he had a better sprint race, in terms of the result, he beat Antonelli because of Antonelli, extending the track too many times. But Russell has got to step it up because his performance really is nowhere near where it should be. Lewis Hamilton then in 7th. Again, even though Hamilton has struggled compared to Leclerc this weekend, I mean, you can visibly see there with the gap, 3.5 tenths slower. That is pretty slow for Lewis compared to Leclerc. What do you call it? Even though he's that far off his teammate, still Ferrari as a team did not quite deliver the performance that I think they really could have delivered in sprint qualifying. I think if they had maximized their performance with both cars, Leclerc, I think, would have been at worst in second, and then Hamilton probably would have been at least ahead of Russell and Verstappen and been in the mix with Antonelli and Piastri. So again, Ferrari, there is much more performance there than what was shown. Franco Colapinto then in 8th. A brilliant performance from Colapinto, finally showing the performance that he needs to if he's going to survive in Formula 1, and was actually quicker than Pierre Gasly. In the sprint race, he ended up finishing behind Gasly and was slower, which, I mean, let's be honest, that's what you would expect from the Argentine. As I believe my stream just briefly disconnected. Sorry about that if that did happen for you guys. Yeah, hopefully it's all good now. So yeah, Colapinto then 8th, Isaac Hadjar 9th. Hadjar was really distraught after sprint qualifying. Didn't understand at all why he was so far behind Max. He just did not get it at all. A second, he was slower than Verstappen in sprint qualifying, and in the sprint race, he finished, was it like 10 to 15 seconds off in 19 laps? So yeah, not quite sure what's happening there for Hadjar, but he's not had a great weekend. But he's still, good enough to score points. So I think as long as Hadjar can be ahead of the 2 Alpines, if he can do that, then results-wise, that's good enough, because the Red Bull is still slower than the front 3 teams of Mercedes, Ferrari, and McLaren. So the result this weekend for Hadjar is more important than the performance, I would say, because, maybe he just doesn't like this track as much as Verstappen. I don't remember Hadjar being that strong here last year for Racing Bulls, so maybe it's just a bad track for him. But and then you got Pierre Gasly then in 10th, just confirming that Alpine are super quick this weekend. And let me just quickly read out the rest of the results from sprint qualifying. Just outside of the top 10 are the 2 Audis of Bortoleto and Hulkenberg. Audi pretty comfortably the second best midfield team. So that would be, the 6th best team. Audi were miles behind Alpine, though, in the sprint race. Alpine look like they're about, half a second at least quicker than Audi. Maybe even more. So, yeah, Audi quite far off. And then Behrman in 13th. Sainz 14th, Lindblad 15th, and then Lawson, Ocon, Perez, Albon, Bottas, and then Alonso, Stroll didn't do a proper lap time in the end and weren't even really classified within the sprint qualifying results. But in terms of the midfield, at the front of the midfield, it looks pretty clear who the quickest teams are. Alpine, by far the fastest midfield team. Audi look like the only team that could capitalise on any problems for Alpine. And then after that, you've got a fight between Haas, Williams, and Racing Bulls for, 13th, 14th place. So, yeah, the midfield quite spread apart this weekend. But one thing I wanted to say, though, quickly, before we look at the sector time data, just to see where certain teams are doing well. Obviously, coming into this, not coming into this Grand Prix, but coming out of the Japanese Grand Prix, we all agree that Mercedes, after that Japanese Grand Prix, Mercedes had the best car, comfortably had the best car. In terms of the gap between them and the next best car, we can debate it, but at Suzuka, McLaren were second best, and then Ferrari were third best. Ferrari were a bit stronger in the race, compared to McLaren. McLaren was still quicker than Ferrari, but it was a bit closer. The point I'm trying to make there between those two teams. But this weekend, Mercedes, This weekend, Mercedes are not the fastest team. When, let's say, there'd been no upgrades between, and by the way, sorry if you can hear a cat screaming in the background. Great timing. Yeah, coming out of the Japanese Grand Prix, Mercedes, you would have expected to be around a track like this, which is not exactly power dominant, but still has those zones where straight line speed is important, you would have expected Mercedes to be probably 2 to 3 tenths of a second quicker than the next best team. But obviously, so far this weekend, Mercedes look like they are probably 2 to 3 tenths slower than the fastest team, which, you could debate. Maybe it is McLaren. At least in the sprint race, it was McLaren. But I do think McLaren, to a degree, did benefit from track position to be able to show their true pace when Leclerc in the Ferrari was in the dirty air of Oscar Piastri. So I don't think Leclerc could show as much of his true performance, say, as Lando Norris could up front, having completely clear air. So, yeah. In terms of who the fastest team is, I think McLaren and Ferrari are pretty much on the same pace. But Mercedes, I would say are 2 to 3 tenths of a second off the pace. Why is that? Well, it is simple. It is upgrades. McLaren brought a series of upgrades. We know McLaren are such a good team at developing their car. They've done it so many times in the last couple of years or so, where they've brought a load of upgrades and transformed, or it has transformed their season, and they've become much quicker. Obviously, remember a couple of years ago at this Grand Prix in 2024, McLaren brought some upgrades, won the race, and ended up fighting for the championship. Before then, they were miles behind Red Bull. Obviously, we remember back in 2023, they were a midfield team, brought a load of upgrades, and became a front-running team. So McLaren are, at this point, the best team in Formula One at developing their car over the course of a season. I think that is just clear to see at this point, and I don't think can be debated. And that's why McLaren are in the position they're in. If they hadn't brought any upgrades, any serious upgrades this weekend, McLaren would probably be 2 to 3 tenths behind Mercedes. But McLaren, to me, I would say have improved by about half a second compared to Mercedes. And that's why they are now ahead, at least at this circuit, of the Mercedes team. Ferrari, on the other hand, they brought 11 separate upgrades for this race. So a big upgrade package for Ferrari. You could almost say a new car for the Ferrari team, given the amount of upgrades they brought. And I've seen some people online saying, the upgrades haven't worked. I don't think that's the case. They have worked. They just don't seem to have worked as well as people think, because McLaren have improved so much. Ferrari, their upgrades have transformed them as well. Ferrari are also, I would say, half a second quicker compared to Mercedes than they were before. And this weekend, at least, they are also, like McLaren, faster than Mercedes. That is clear to see. So, McLaren and Ferrari both have improved by half a second. And also Red Bull, through some upgrades and also shedding probably about 5 to 6 kilos of weight, they have also cut down the gap between them and Mercedes. The gap between Mercedes and Red Bull at the Japanese Grand Prix was about a second. Now, it's, maybe 3 to 4 tenths? So, Red Bull are much more with it. They are still Red Bull, the slowest of the front 4 teams. There is no doubt about that. As I'll show in a moment with the sector time data, they are still struggling through the corners. And that's where they're giving away the lap time. That's what the difference is between the very top teams at the moment and Red Bull, which hopefully they will improve on that as the season goes on. But the exciting thing is, because of the upgrades that we've had this weekend for McLaren, for Ferrari, for Red Bull, 2026 has come alive. Because now we've got McLaren, who at this point are going to be able to fight Mercedes at pretty much every Grand Prix. They legitimately now, McLaren, have got a proper race-winning contending car. So do Ferrari, even though I'd say it's less so with Ferrari still because they have the weakness of the power unit, which is affecting them. Ferrari, I don't think they've got. I think their engine upgrade is going to be coming probably at either the next Grand Prix in Canada or in about a month from now. So there is still more to come for Ferrari as well. Another thing to add with McLaren, they do have also some more upgrade parts coming at the next Grand Prix in Canada. So this isn't the end of McLaren's development schedule for this part of the season. Also, another thing I need to mention is Mercedes. The reason they've been caught so quickly through upgrades is because Mercedes have decided not to bring too many upgrades at this point of the season because they want to bring a larger package of upgrades later on in the in this, say, European season or European part of the season. So Mercedes, they will bring their upgrades. They will improve as well. But again, without a doubt, Mercedes have got a fight on their hands because McLaren and Ferrari have now properly arrived to the party and are now proper contenders. Again, what races McLaren can win and what races Ferrari can win, that's a discussion to be had, maybe at a different point. Maybe, we'll have that later on in this stream. But McLaren and Ferrari are here. They are right where they need to be now to properly contend at the very front. And Mercedes, if they're going to win the championships, they've got a proper fight on their hands, and they're going to have to really make sure that they deliver with the upgrades they do eventually bring, and also they need to really make sure they deliver on circuit in terms of getting the best results they can, because McLaren and Ferrari, again, they are here. And Red Bull, they've improved a lot, and they've still got, I think, I saw a rumor that they're still about 5 to 6 kilos overweight, which is another probably couple tenths of a second that could be found. So Red Bull, they will also keep improving. So as the season goes on, I think the fight between those front four teams is just going to get even closer. So that's why I say, and that's why I said at the start of this stream, 2026 has come alive because we have now got several drivers and teams at the front now fighting properly for the win. But anyway, let's get into the sector time data from sprint qualifying, just to illustrate where certain teams are doing well and certain teams are not doing so well. And I think this first sector really illustrates that Ferrari and McLaren have genuinely improved a lot through car upgrades, because in the first sector, which is the sector that really shows aerodynamic quality, Ferrari and McLaren on the same pace through the first sector, and Mercedes 0.3 off, and that really is making the difference this weekend. That's why Mercedes have been slower than those two teams this weekend, because through the corners they just don't have the same car. Down the straights, the Mercedes engine is still the best. There is no doubt about that. But unfortunately for them, McLaren are also Mercedes powered, which really could come back to bite Mercedes towards the end of the season, especially if McLaren continue to improve their car aerodynamically. But yeah, the first sector, that's really what is deciding the gap up front. Red Bull, half a second off still compared to Ferrari and McLaren. And again, that is why Red Bull are still not at the level of those two teams, because they still don't have a good enough aero and chassis package. They have cut some weight off the car, which has definitely improved them. And the car, through the corners, I mean, Max has said that he feels a lot more confident within the car in terms of the handling. So it's improved, but they are still quite a bit away from where they need to be if they're going to start winning races. So, yeah, still a bit to go for Red Bull. Alpine then a couple tenths off. And then you've got Audi a second off the pace in just the first sector alone. Just shows you how big the gap is between the front and the midfield. the field spread has really been evident this weekend. Audi, in sprint qualifying, Audi were, 1.5 seconds off pole. So, yeah, and they were, 11th and 12th. So, yeah, quite a big gap between the, say, more so the front of the midfield and the very front of the field. And then you've got Williams just ahead of Haas. Haas have been surprisingly poor this weekend. Their team boss, Ao Komatsu, has said that they brought some upgrades that have not quite worked out this weekend, and apparently they didn't quite expect to be that quick this weekend, which I think is a bit of copium, let's say, that comment, because if you look at the other high aero configuration circuit we went to in Shanghai, Haas were probably the fastest midfield team there, so I don't really get why Haas are so slow. There's no reason for them to be half a second slower than Alpine in just the first sector. That is just nowhere near good enough. They really need, I don't know if it's a setup thing or they just need to find a way to optimize the new upgrades or whatever, but they should be a lot quicker around this track. There's no excuse for them to be, as far off the pace as they are. And then you got Racing Bulls. Not really a surprise that they're slow. They're always going to be quicker at lower downforce circuits. That's why they were quick in Melbourne and Suzuka. And Shanghai. I mean, they did score points in Shanghai, but they weren't generally as fast as they were at those other circuits. Yeah, they will be probably a bit more at it in Montreal in 3 weeks, and then Aston Martin only just by half a tenth quicker than Cadillac in the first sector. With Aston Martin, by the way, they are still having the vibrations. They still have the same configuration of power unit as they did at the start of the season. The next Grand Prix in Canada is where they get not the next configuration, I'd say the new, you'd hope, proper configuration from Honda with the power unit. So, in terms of power unit improvements, we should start to see that from Honda and Aston Martin, hopefully, at the next race in Canada in 3 weeks' time. The middle sector is, half of it is flat out, and then the other half of it is slow speed, very pedestrian corners. Mercedes and McLaren, the two fastest teams. No surprise, because again, the Mercedes power unit is going to show its real quality through this part of the lap. The Ferrari, though, not that far off, only a tenth and a half off. Red Bull, 2 tenths off. Then a bit of a drop off to Alpine and Audi, pretty much on the same pace. A bit of a drop off then to Haas and Williams, pretty much on the same pace. Racing Bulls, don't quite get why they're so slow in the middle sector. They should be really in there with Haas and Williams, so probably is a couple more tenths to find there for Racing Bulls. And then Cadillac quicker than Aston Martin, which is not a surprise because, again, this is the more power-heavy part of the circuit. Cadillac, though, not a million miles away from the other midfield teams ahead of them. And then the final sector is that back straight, which is literally straight to the hairpin, and then from the exit of the hairpin to the start-finish line, it is flat out. So it is the most power-dominant part of the lap, the final sector. And again, Mercedes, no surprise, the fastest team. Red Bull, though, only just behind, and Red Bull showing that with their engine, and also with the new Macarena wing they've brought this weekend, which has a gigantic gap in the rear wing that is absolutely massive. The biggest gap in the rear wing I've ever seen. The Red Bull is very quick down the straights. So that is, in the race, something to be, for the other teams to really, I won't say look at, but something they need to be cautious about, because if the Red Bull's within a second of them, could be some trouble. McLaren and Ferrari, only a tenth off. Alpine, 2 tenths off. Williams, 3 tenths off. And then you got Haas. And then Cadillac 8th fastest team in the final sector. Slightly quicker than Racing Bulls and over a tenth quicker than Audi, even. So Cadillac doing very well, optimizing that Ferrari power unit. Only half a second off the pace of Mercedes. And then Aston Martin, as usual, at the very back. So, if I go back to the results of the top 10, in terms of the pecking order, at the very front, I think McLaren probably do have the fastest car, but I don't think it's by enough where they can clearly get pole position. I think Ferrari, with Leclerc in their car, are close enough to where they can definitely snatch pole. So McLaren, I would say quickest, only just ahead of Ferrari. Third quickest, definitely Mercedes. Fourth quickest, definitely Red Bull. Fifth quickest, definitely Alpine. Sixth, Audi. Seventh, I'd probably say Haas. I still think there is more they can find in that car around this track. I don't think they've fully optimized the package this weekend. At least not yet. Remember, they can still alter the setup until qualifying, which begins, by the way, in about 45 minutes' time. So, yeah, I'd say Haas just ahead of Williams, who are just ahead of Racing Bulls, and then Cadillac 10th and Aston Martin easily the slowest team. So there's your pecking order. And regarding, or based on that pecking order, here is my top 10 prediction for qualifying for the Miami Grand Prix. So on pole position, I think it will be Charles Leclerc, just about by a tenth of a second ahead of the two McLarens of Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri. Kimi Antonelli, I think, will take fourth. Fifth will be Lewis Hamilton, who I think will be a tad better in qualifying than he was in the sprint in terms of his own performance. Just ahead of Russell, who is just not having a good weekend. Russell not performing anywhere near well enough as far as I'm concerned. And in that form, I think he'll continue in that vein and end up in sixth. Max Verstappen, I'm going in seventh because Red Bull are the slowest of the front four teams. And even though Max is the best driver out there, as long as everyone else does their job, I just don't see him any higher than seventh. Gasly, I think, will take eighth place. Isaac Hadjar, I think, will be a bit closer to Max in lap time and end up in ninth. And then Franco Colapinto, I think, will take P10. So there you go. That's my prediction for qualifying. And yeah, we are 45 minutes away from the beginning of the session. And I will do a roundup of the team soon, just to give my thoughts as to where they should all be. By the way, this livery on the screen, this Racing Bulls livery, absolutely horrible. Whoever thought of that should be, quite frankly, fired, because it looks terrible. It looks like they just covered the car in butter. It just looks horrible. Worst special livery I think I've ever seen from that team. The last special livery they did was it Suzuka, was actually pretty good as well. So, yeah, disappointing. But, yeah, let me know, guys, in the chat. Yeah, let me know. What do you think is going to happen in qualifying? And, of course, make sure to vote in the poll running in the chat. Who do you think will take pole position for the Miami Grand Prix? Let me know your thoughts. And, yeah, I'll read out some of your comments soon enough. A couple of things, though, I just want to go through before we go any further. Firstly, if you are new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe for more content like this. Bottom right to the screen, you can subscribe right there. Obviously, make sure to smash a like button. Let's try and get up as many likes as we can on this stream. That'd be great if you could do that. Obviously, it does help the channel in the algorithm. So, yeah, make sure to do that if you can. That would be great. And as well, if you are watching, I think it might be on mobile. I think there is a boost button below the stream if you are a viewer on mobile. If you can, please press that. And what that does is it boosts the stream's visibility on the website. So yeah, if you could do that, make sure to. Be fantastic if you could. Yeah, a couple of things I just want to go through. Firstly, sad news today about Alex Zanardi. Rest in peace to the Italian who passed away. Or the news, came out earlier today that he passed away at 60 years old, I think it was. Obviously, a massive shame what happened to him a quarter of a century ago now. The really bad accident he had that put him, in a wheelchair. He had such a great career in motorsport before then, in America, in the kart series. He was fantastic over in America. He did have a couple goes in F1. He was in F1 before he went to the kart series, I believe. And then because of his success in America, he then got a chance at Williams in 99, which unfortunately just didn't go to plan. He just wasn't, for whatever reason, he just couldn't get a hold of Formula One cars as well as he could, those kart cars. He did have a couple decent races, I remember. There was one race at Monza, his home race, where I think he was up in a podium position for quite a while. But, yeah, unfortunately for him, it didn't work out. And then a couple of years later, unfortunately, had a really bad accident. But despite that, he still had a great life after that, in terms of the work he did for, I think the physically disabled, and as well, let me just have a look. I think, wasn't he, didn't he do some Paralympic stuff? I think he did. Yeah, he was a paracyclist. Yeah, so he, despite what happened to him, which again was absolutely horrendous, still went on to have a brilliant career. Absolutely brilliant career. And again, such sad news about his passing. Obviously, thoughts and prayers with all of his loved ones and anyone that knew him. But yeah, what a brilliant career. I think that's his story is a real inspiration because it shows that despite having a horrific accident, you can still accomplish a lot in life, like he did, both pre and even post his accident. He did a lot in life. So yeah, absolutely fantastic. And yeah, it's real sad news, but hopefully there'll be a good celebration of his life. Out there, say online, and also I'm sure there'll be some sort of event in person to celebrate, his life and his achievements. So yeah, sad news, but yeah, rest in peace to Alex Zanardi. But also, one thing I did want to just quickly mention before I read any comments from the chat. Of course, if you saw my post on my community tab and in my Discord server yesterday, I announced what my plan was for what content I was doing for the Miami Grand Prix, and you would have seen that I announced that I was and am not doing a race watch along, and that is still the case. Just wanted to quickly announce why. And the reason it is even though it is forecast to be a wet race, because of America's laws about suspending sporting events and any events, outdoor events, in the event of lightning, thunder and lightning and all that stuff. That's really why I'm not going to be bothering to do a race watch along, because even if we do get a wet race, what it looks like is going to happen is we are going to get lots of delays, lots of red flags, and it's, if I was to do a race watch along, it's going to end up being 5-6 hours, and it's just not worth it, especially for a track like this, which is not even that good. And I don't even think in the wet is going to provide that great of a race, to be honest. I mean, we saw in the sprint race, this track is just garbage. It is a rubbish racetrack. I've already seen people online complaining that the changes to the power unit is why the sprint race was so boring. That's not the case. It's because the track is shit. That's why, quite frankly, I don't think I'm ever going to do a race watch along for a Miami Grand Prix again, because it is a terrible, terrible racetrack. Arguably the worst on the calendar. It is genuinely terrible. Honestly, for as much as I hated it, I think the Sochi Autodrome in Russia, I think that track you could probably say was a better quality circuit than this. And that circuit in Russia literally provided us a race in 2017 that had 0 overtakes. Yet I would say even that one was probably better. This Miami circuit is garbage, and we've got to put up with it until 2041. So buckle up. Another 15 years of absolute bullshit. So yeah, the reason I'm not doing a race watch long is, I guess, for 2 reasons. One, because we're going to have loads of delays because of the thunder and lightning laws that you have in America, which is, fair enough. They have thunder and lightning way more than we do, so in the UK. So it's fair enough that, they suspend outdoor events in those event, or in the event that happens. And also, not only am I not doing a race watch long because the track is awful, but also Miami or Florida is one of those places where when it rains, it absolutely chucks it down. So, say very similar to Malaysia, whenever it rained in a race there, it would end up being a monsoon, and I think that's what's going to happen probably tomorrow. And yeah, I just can't be bothered to put up with 2-3 hour long delays to end up getting 30 maybe good laps of racing in around a absolutely awful track. So yeah, that's why I'm not going to be bothering to do a race stream. But I will be doing a podcast on Monday reviewing whatever happens in the race. Even if we get a shortened race, or the race starts a few hours earlier and it ends up being dry, or whatever. On Monday, I will be uploading a podcast reviewing the race. One thing I can announce, though, for people that are fans of the race watch along, the race watch along will be returning at the next Grand Prix. The next Grand Prix on the calendar is the Canadian Grand Prix in Montreal, which is unfortunately 3 weeks away. I wish it was next week, but it is 3 weeks from now for whatever reason. And yeah, I will be doing both a qualifying and race watch along for that race weekend. So the race watch along is coming back, and yeah, I'll be back for the next race in Canada in 3 weeks' time. And then once we get to that Canadian Grand Prix, we should start to develop some momentum for this season, because once we get to June, there's 3 races in June and then another 3, I think, in July. So yeah, the season really starts to get going, I'd say, probably once we get to the Canadian Grand Prix in 3 weeks. But yeah, that's the plan, content-wise. And another thing to announce regarding content is, unfortunately, because I've got a lot on my plate at the minute regarding uni work, after this Grand Prix and between this Grand Prix and the Canadian Grand Prix, there is not going to be any content on the channel, unfortunately. And again, that is because I've just got a lot of uni work to do at the minute. So yeah, that is unfortunately going to be the case. But like I said, once we get to the Canadian Grand Prix, things will start properly happening, and I should be able as well to make a bit more recorded videos and get those some more of those out when we get into the proper summer as well. I did upload 4 videos during the month of April. If you haven't seen any of them, make sure to go check them out on my channel. Yeah, I uploaded all of them during the month of April. And if you did watch them, hope you enjoyed them. And like I said, if you haven't, make sure to go check them out. But before I come to any more or any comments in the chat, let me just post a link of the stream out quickly, and then we will read out some of the best comments from the chat, as we've only got half an hour to go until the start of the session. So let me just quickly post this stream link out. Compliments here to Watchalong qualifying in Miami. There you go. So hopefully we'll get a few more people joining us. And yeah, hello to you guys. Good to see some of the regulars and all of you in the chat. And yeah, let's just have a quick read of some of your comments, and then we'll do a quick roundup of the teams soon as well. Probably in, I don't know, the next 20 minutes or so. Hello to Super Kev. Looney Classic saying, what's going on with Lewis? He was slow yesterday and today. 2 reasons why I think he's slow. One, I don't think he likes this Miami circuit. He hasn't had a good Miami Grand Prix since this Grand Prix came on the calendar, so that's what I think that is. And secondly, I think the start of the season, the very start of the season, has wrongly led people to believing that Lewis Hamilton is suddenly back to being the Hamilton of old. This Ferrari car is a lot better than last year's Ferrari car. It is. I'm sure Hamilton is more happy with it than, last year's car. But he is not the driver he used to be. That is still the case. For him to be 4/10 off his teammate in sprint qualifying, that's nowhere near good enough. That wouldn't even be good enough if you were Carlos Sainz. Never mind Lewis Hamilton. So, yeah. I think it's, just a mixture of he doesn't like this circuit. Plus, he is not the driver he used to be. He is, a driver that, maybe here and there can put in some good performances, but he is not the driver that is, that we saw a few years ago, who's going to be basically a 9 out of 10 every week. That's just not the case anymore. Supercub says Lewis is keeping up with a Kardashian, or keeping up touch with a Kardashian. Head's not there. I did find it funny when someone interviewed him a couple days ago at the track for the Grand Prix weekend, and Lewis was like, I think they asked him, "Oh, what did you do during the break?" And he was like, "Oh, I didn't have any break. I was just at the factory all the time." Bullshit. And the reason that is bullshit is because we have seen online. Not that I care, but I see it anyway, because people that I interact with in the F1 community end up sharing whatever images of it. But yeah, he's been hanging around with his girlfriend, Kim Kardashian, at, was it Coachella? There was a picture of them in, I think, was it Japan? He has not been at the factory for all of the 5 weeks. He probably has been most of the time, but he also has been spending time with his girlfriend, which, by the way, there's nothing wrong with that. I'd hope he spends time with his loved ones, but there's no need to say that, oh, I haven't had a break at all. I've just been working in the factory every day, because that is just, again, rubbish. Someone might say you're telling me that Red Bull's livery was inspired by buttery croissant. Yeah, that Racing Bull livery is just absolutely terrible. We've seen so many, especially in the last couple years, Red Bull with their two teams, they love to do special liveries. We've seen so many of them, and most of them end up being good. But yeah, that Racing Bulls livery is absolutely terrible. I think at night it would maybe look a bit better, but in the daylight it just looks, yeah, it looks horrendous. Sean Osborne says Max is not the best driver. Let me know why. And yeah, someone might say Rip to Zanardi, he was unstoppable for a few years at IndyCar. Yeah, he was absolutely brilliant in America. One of the best European imports, I guess, if you want to call it that, into American top, say, American open wheel racing. I don't think you could say the best because Alex Palou at the minute is crushing IndyCar. He really is. But yeah, back in the day, and when I say back in the day, we're talking what, say 30 years ago, he was absolutely brilliant, Zanardi. A Looney Classic saying, it's sad, man. Why is Lewis running around with Kim Kardashian of all people? Poor judgment indeed. He's clearly on his way out now. I mean, I'm sure we all have our opinions of not just Kim Kardashian, but the Kardashians and all of the, you know, the stuff that surrounds them. But I mean, you know, he's absolutely fine to date her, obviously, if he wants to. I don't think it's an issue whatsoever. But I think he is clearly positioning himself for post Formula One life. Because, you know, when he retires from Formula One, I know he has a place in Monaco, but I think he is going to spend a lot of time in America when he is done with Formula One. And I think that's kind of a shift in maybe that direction. I'm not saying he is going to retire, you know, very soon, but I think he's positioning himself towards that direction at least. But, you know, it's his decision. Yanni says, hi, Chazza. Hi Chazza, says Yanni. Just saying hello. I am not watching or following this year's F1. I hate everything about the cars except that they are smaller. It's painful. I understand. Yeah, after the first three races, I was absolutely... I wasn't angry with how these cars were. I was more so just really gutted and disappointed because, again, they look a lot better. They are visibly smaller and more nimble, and I was really excited by that, and just been ruined by the power units. But like I said, the changes they made in the last couple weeks is a step in the right direction. So don't give up totally just yet. Ewok says regulations will only change the limit the teams that enter the season with advantage. I don't believe that. The regulations were changed because the cars were awful to drive. I mean, even Antonelli, who's the championship leader, he even, you know, clearly referenced this after his pole position in Japan, that he said that Suzuka was not the same challenge, which is a disgraceful thing to say. And it's not wrong that he said that. It's disgraceful in the regard that Suzuka should be one of the biggest tests of a driver's skill every year. But the way the cars were, especially back then, it made it so much less of a test. So I don't And I'm sure there'll be accusations from other people, but I really do not believe that the regulation changes were done to limit Mercedes' advantage. And I don't think they do limit Mercedes' advantage, the regulation changes. The regulation changes make the cars better to drive, but I don't think they change the performance levels of the cars. I really don't. I don't believe that. Mercedes still have the best engine, regardless of the split between the ICE and the battery. So, yeah, I don't think that's why. I don't think that's why Mercedes have been the third fastest team so far this weekend. It's because McLaren and Ferrari have brought loads of upgrades and have clearly improved. And obviously, we can't forget McLaren are Mercedes powered. So, yeah, I don't think it's quite down to the regulations. Looney Classic says, I don't want to hear about age, guys. LeBron James is 41 too, and he just sent the Rockets packing. It's clearly still that guy at 41. True. I think it's different though, comparing Formula One to basketball, because in Formula One, let's say that drop off in your physical ability, the reaction times and the very small details and nuances of what makes a driver elite. Once you start to lose those things, or not lose them, but when you start to get to that point where physically you're not able to be as good in those areas as you were, it costs you more in Formula One than it does in basketball. Because in basketball, if you are, say, 5% or even 10% less good physically than you were in your prime, you can still be, a great player or the best player. When in Formula One, you can have even like I said, a 5-10% drop off, and that can be the difference between you being still the best and being 2 or 3 tenths slower and just not quite being the same driver. That physical drop off as you get older, again, in motorsport, it harms you more because of how close the competition is. When, again, basketball, I mean, not all the quality of a basketball player is down to the physical side, even though the physical side is really important in basketball. You've obviously got the technical skills, which, as long as you're really good in that area, you can still get away with being really good. But I think, it's, like, for example, LeBron James, I mean, physically, the guy is an absolute monster. He is like a god physically. But he, I guarantee you he is probably 5%, maybe 10% even slower than he was, say, 10 or 12 years ago. But again, that doesn't affect you as much in basketball as it does in motorsport, being that slight bit less at your physical peak. So I'd say the same, for example, football. In football, a great example would be someone who I consider to be the greatest of all time, Lionel Messi. Lionel Messi physically is not as good, or really that close, I would say, to being as physically quick and agile and nimble as he was when he was in his prime. But he's still an amazing player, and he still was when he won the World Cup 4 years ago. Because it doesn't, again, affect you as much in those types of sports. There are sports where just a slight drop off of, like I said, 5 to 10% physically can be the difference between being the best and being, maybe around 5th or 6th best. So it's not a fair comparison, is I think the point I'm trying to make. Ewok, what percentage of drop off is Alonso suffering from? I did actually think of him when I was making that point. Alonso he's a freak, let's be honest. He is an absolute freak. Given what he's still doing, and I think what makes him such a freak is still the motivation he has at this point of his career and life in general. But it's still the same for Alonso. Alonso, he is still a great driver, but Fernando Alonso is not as good now as he was 15 years ago. He's not. If you put, let's say the Aston Martin car was able to win races. If you put the 2012 version of Alonso in the Aston Martin, which again, let's say that Aston Martin was a race contending car, Alonso would be winning a lot of races and would be maybe not the best driver on the grid, but it'd be very close to it. It'd be a shootout between him and Verstappen. This version of Alonso, still great, but he is not quite the same as peak Fernando Alonso. Peak Fernando Alonso, I would say, is, in terms of the absolute peak, probably between, say, 2010 and 2013. I think is probably the absolute peak of Alonso's powers. Yeah, this version of Alonso is not quite there. But he's still, because of how high his peak was, he's still really, really good, because even though he's not at the exact same level, he's still, close enough to it, which is what makes him still such a great driver right now compared to who is around now. But, it's different for different people. Some people drop off quicker than others. Look at Sebastian Vettel. He really dropped off quite a lot. If you go and compare him to the Vettel in, say, 2017, Sebastian Vettel in 2017 was what, 28? Was he 28 or 30? Something like that. He was very late 20s, maybe just about 30 years old. 5 years later, Vettel was nowhere near the same driver. He was a shadow, quite frankly, of who he was. So, again, it affects different people. And with Lewis, I think he's just got to that point where he just, again, physically, it just isn't quite right at it like he used to be, which, again, it happens to everyone. And because of how competitive the very front of the field is, that slight drop off in physical or even mental performance is ultimately what makes the difference. Anyway, before we go any further and I answer any more comments, let me just quickly do a roundup of the teams. So for Mercedes-Benz, not looking quite like the weekend that they thought they were going to have coming into this Miami Grand Prix. They look to be, I think, quite comfortably the third fastest team, at least for qualifying. If they can get a car into the top 3 on the grid, I think that would be a pretty good result. Obviously, Antonelli in sprint qualifying ended up second. If they can do that, that would be great, despite them probably ending up, they'll probably end up having a really bad start, so they'll throw all of that progress away anyway. But given where they're at in the pecking order, if Norris, Piastri, and, say, Leclerc, if those 3 all do the best job really they can do, then there's only so much Mercedes can do. I think 4th and 5th, that area is really the best Mercedes can do today. unless they, for whatever reason, are a lot quicker. Maybe they found some extra performance on the setup. We'll have to see. But if they don't, they're going to have to rely on either one of those three drivers I just mentioned not quite having the best Q3 to get themselves into the top three on the grid. Because they look like they're more so, fourth, fifth on the grid, which is obviously nowhere near where they want to be. Ferrari have got a very good car. Maybe not the best car, but a car that is absolutely good enough to get pole position. Charles Leclerc, a driver who has had pole position here before in the first edition of the Miami Grand Prix, actually 4 years ago. That was a Grand Prix when Ferrari actually locked out the front row. Didn't end up winning, but they were very quick that day. But yeah, Leclerc, he's always been pretty quick here in Miami. And as long as the car is there for him, which I think it will be, I don't see why he can't take pole. We know how good he is in qualifying and how much of a speed demon he is in qualifying. So, as long as he delivers, I think the car will be there for him, and I think he will be ultimately on pole position. The Red Bull, they've improved a lot, but still, I think we need to really manage expectations. They are not going to be anywhere near that fight for pole position. Still, they're still at best half a second off the pace of the very quickest team. And I think more likely, Max is probably fighting for a slot on the third row of the grid, which if he can get it, would be a good result, because that is pretty much the best Red Bull can hope for. For Isaac Hadjar, hopefully he can get closer to his teammate in lap time. If he does, then a fourth row grid slot, I think, is there for him to take. And really for Hadjar, as long as he outqualifies both Alpine drivers, I think that will probably be a good enough result for him. But yeah, Red Bull definitely the slowest of the front four teams. Meanwhile, for McLaren, they've returned to being pretty much what they were last year, the quickest team on the grid. They are not, though, as quick as they were this time last year at this particular Grand Prix, where they really were miles quicker than the rest of the field. They do have the fastest car for qualifying, but I think it's only by probably a tenth of a second. Will that be enough for Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri to deliver a pole position? We will find out. It's going to be very close. Remember, Lando Norris has outqualified Piastri 2-0 in sprint qualifying sessions, but in normal qualifying sessions, Oscar Piastri has outqualified Lando Norris 3-0 so far this season. So, so far this weekend, Norris has been quicker, but do not count out the Australian Oscar Piastri, of course, won the Miami Grand Prix a year ago. So yeah, McLaren have probably got the best car of all, but whether they will get pole or not, it really comes down to whether the drivers can deliver when it really matters most. Into the midfield, Audi, if they can get a car into the top 10, that would be a fantastic result for them, to be honest. Alpine look miles quicker than them, and they really need to hope that either Colapinto has a stinker of a performance, which of course is possible because Colapinto has done that before, or that Alpine, for some reason, get messed up with something, some reliability issue, or someone blocks them in qualifying, or something like that. Because that's the only way they can get ahead of even just one of the Alpine cars. Alpine are that far ahead of Audi in terms of performance. Audi at least should end up 11th and 12th, which at least is a good enough position to maybe take advantage of whoever has a DNF or whatever from the top 10 for Sunday. But yeah, Audi, nowhere near the performance, unfortunately, of Alpine. Haas also nowhere near as quick as really they should be at this track. They should be really fighting with Alpine, if not maybe even quicker, around a track like this. They have been really quite slow this weekend. As long as they're ahead, though, Williams and Racing Bulls, and of course Cadillac, then maybe with Oliver Behrman, who is having a great season, maybe they can still get a decent result to set them up for maybe a decent race on Sunday. So if Behrman can be, say, 12th, maybe 13th in qualifying, that would be probably a decent result. Racing Bulls, not very quick this weekend. One of the slowest teams, actually, on the grid this weekend. If they can get both cars into Q2, I think that'd be an achievement. For Alpine, though, they've got to get both cars into Q3. They clearly are quicker than the rest of the midfield. They got both cars into SQ3 in sprint qualifying and were comfortably quicker than the rest of the midfield of the sprint race. They know what they've got. They've just got to deliver it in qualifying. Williams, just like Racing Bulls, if they get both cars into the second part of qualifying, Q2, that would be good enough. Williams still really lacking a lot of performance compared to not even just the front of the field, but even the front of the midfield. Williams, by the way, there was a rumour a couple weeks ago discussing some of the teams who are overweight. It is rumoured that Williams are as much as 20 kilos overweight. So Williams have still got a long way to go in shaving off that weight and finding more performance. Aston Martin are going to be behind Cadillac. Their engine is still terrible. And Cadillac, yeah, should be ahead of Aston Martin. And hopefully they'll get both cars ahead of them and end up in 19th and 20th. And a quick reminder, here is my top 10 qualifying prediction for this session in Miami. Charles Leclerc, I think, will take pole just about by a tenth of a second ahead of Lando Norris. Piastri, I think, will be third in the second McLaren. Kimi Antonelli, the championship leader, I think, will be in fourth. Lewis Hamilton, I'm going in fifth. Russell sixth. Verstappen seventh. Gasly eighth. Hadjar ninth. And Franco Colapinto, I think, will end up in P10. As we have got only, 5 more minutes until the session is underway. So if you've got any final predictions, guys, or comments, get them in the chat and I'll quickly read them before we get going. There you go. And one thing I will do quickly is have a quick drink to help my throat a bit. Obviously, I've not streamed for a while, so that's why my throat is not in great condition. Not as used to it by this point of the year as I normally am. As the F1 intro now begins to play. Crystal, good to see you in the chat. Let's see if I can find a couple other comments quick. Looney Classic says Alonso is flattered by the weak teammates he has. It looks bad because he's up against a beast. Or Hamilton looks bad because he's up against a beast in Charles and before him Russell. Yeah, I think that's a fair comment. I mean, if Alonso was in the same team as Leclerc, I think Leclerc would out-qualify Alonso over the course of a season. But of course, Alonso, his strongest point is the races. It is, again, hard to compare Alonso to Hamilton because they're in such different cars and have been for such long time. But I will say, even though Lewis, yeah, he is in the same team as Leclerc, who is so quick, and was obviously in the same team as Russell, who is also really quick, he should still be closer in lap time. You know, for example, in sprint qualifying, 4 tenths off, that is just way too much. If he was only a tenth, maybe 2 tenths at most off, fair enough. But, yeah, around half a second is way too much. But, yeah, I think we'll just get into qualifying. Again, make sure to vote in the poll in the chat. Let me know, who do you think takes pole position for this Miami Grand Prix? A quick reminder of the championship standings before we go into this session. Antonelli, after the sprint race, is only 7 points clear of teammate George Russell. Charles Leclerc in third, 20 points off the lead. Lewis Hamilton in fourth. Lando Norris after the sprint win. The championship, the world champion, or rather, is in 5th place and is just over 40 points off the lead of the championship. Piastri in the second McLaren, only 5 points behind Lando. Oliver Behrman then in 7th. Gasly in 8th. Verstappen is now level on points with Pierre Gasly in 9th. And in P10, it is still Liam Lawson. On the constructor side, Mercedes in the lead, Ferrari in 2nd, McLaren 3rd, Red Bull now up to 4th after Max Verstappen finished 5th in the sprint race. Haas then in 5th, Alpine in 6th, only a point behind, Racing Bull 7th, Audi 8th, Williams 9th, Cadillac 10th, and Aston Martin in P11. And here we go. And yeah, Q1, of course, 18-minute long session. I'll get the timer on screen and synced up at the 17-minute mark. And of course, as usual, in Q1, we knock out the the 6 slowest cars from 17th down to 22nd. Of course, the 2 Cadillac cars and the 2 Aston Martins will get eliminated. And then I would imagine one of the Williams cars and one of the Racing Bull cars will probably get eliminated as well. So if I was to predict, it'll be Perez, Bottas, Alonso, Stroll, and then probably Lindblad and Albon who end up falling foul of the cutoff zone. As all the cars queued up at the exit of the pit lane, obviously desperate to get out there, get some clear air. The weather conditions, by the way, for today, very hot, very sunny, 33 degrees Celsius, so I think not too far away from 100 degrees Fahrenheit at the track. So no concerns about the weather, but for tomorrow, there are plenty of concerns about the weather. But that's for tomorrow, a different story. We're all focused on today. And really, even in the wet, it's going to be pretty hard to overtake around this circuit. So in terms of winning the race this weekend, this session is crucial in determining who very well could win the Miami Grand Prix. Saying that, in the 4 editions of the Miami Grand Prix we've had, every previous man who has took pole here has failed to go on and win on the Sunday. Charles Leclerc 2022 took pole, finished in 2nd. Same for Sergio Perez in 2023. Same for Max Verstappen in 2024. And then last year, Max Verstappen took pole and ended up finishing in 4th. And normally, the race winner of this race comes from outside the top 2. So, I mean, yeah, track position isn't always important historically, but in terms of being able to overtake around this circuit, it is still pretty difficult. So even though history points against it, you still want to be getting on pole around a street circuit. That's just, common sense, really. And as well, if you go and look at those races where the pole sitter didn't win, wasn't necessarily because the car behind was able to follow really well and overtake. For example, Lando Norris's win in 2024 was very fortunate, really because of a safety car. And then Max's win in 2023 was because the Red Bull was miles quicker than the rest of the field, plus Max was miles quicker than his teammate. So, as we now have the first driver to start a lap here in qualifying. As qualifying has now begun, we are just under 16 minutes away from the conclusion of Q1. And the first driver to start a lap, it is Sergio Perez, who, like I said, took pole position here 3 years ago for Red Bull. Really should have won that race. that Miami Grand Prix 3 years ago, I think, is really what killed Perez's career at Red Bull, because, you know, Verstappen still beating him from, what was it, like ninth on the grid, I think mentally destroyed Perez. And he was never the same at Red Bull after that. But so far this weekend, he's been miles quicker than his teammate Valtteri Bottas, who also has had some good pace here before. Bottas, in the first ever Miami Grand Prix, Valtteri Bottas for Alfa Romeo qualified 5th here and out-qualified both Mercedes cars. Sergio Perez is now coming down the back straight, which is the last overtaking opportunity into the hairpin. Losing the rear end quite a bit on the exit. Comes to the line, and he does a 132.1, which is obviously quite slow. And I think I'll leave Perez down there, because for some reason on my graphic stuff it won't let me drag his name any further up. Oliver Bearman is now quickest. By the way, the pole position time in sprint qualifying was a 1:27.8. Pole position today should be a low 1:27, probably a 27.2, 27.3. So, I mean, Bearman's just done a 1:30.2, which is, yeah, quite a bit away from even what I think he could probably do at best. So these are not exactly quick lap times. As, yeah, Ocon in second, Lindblad third, Hulkenberg has gone fourth on a set of medium compound tyres. And then Alonso is in fifth in the Aston Martin, ahead of Sergio Perez, as Max Verstappen does a very quick lap, a 1:29.0. That's a good first run from Verstappen. Very good first run. And he goes quickest. 9/10 quicker than his teammate Hadjar, as Leclerc is up to second. 3.5 tenths off Verstappen, though. Lewis Hamilton is now third, as here comes Lando Norris, who won the sprint, and he's up to second, about a 10th off the time of what Max Verstappen did. So Norris in second. So it's Verstappen, Norris, Leclerc, Hamilton, Hadjar, and Bearman. That's your top 6. And then Ocon 7th, and then Lindblad 8th, Hulkenberg 9th, Alonso 10th. As we're looking at Oscar Piastri here. Yeah, the quickest lap time in this session, I would expect it to be probably a low 1:28, like a 28, anywhere between a 28.1 and 28.4. So that's why I say that's a very good lap time from Max Verstappen. 1:29.0 straight out of the blocks. Very good indeed from Verstappen. As Oscar Piastri starts his first flying lap, the man who won this Grand Prix a year ago, and a year ago when he won this Grand Prix, that he completed his, was it 4th win in a row, I think it was at the time? Was it 4th win in a row? No, it was 4th win in 5 races. And he was championship leader, of course. Obviously had a great chance at the championship last year that, quite frankly, he threw away. But with the improvements McLaren have made, I think he might have another chance at the championship this year. As good run there through the slow corners for the end of the middle sector. He's 7/10 off Verstappen, though. after the first 2 sectors. Antonelli is slightly up on Verstappen after the first 2 sectors, so Antonelli has started well. That's the McLaren. Very good front end there through the hairpin. Almost too good. As Piastri to the line, goes 6th, but he's almost a second slower than Verstappen, as Antonelli goes 2nd for Mercedes. And here comes his teammate George Russell, who goes almost a second slower than Verstappen and Antonelli. Antonelli only half a tenth off Max Verstappen. So yeah, that is quite poor from Russell, who has not had a good weekend and has really not had a good last couple races in general. That's a replay of Carlos Sainz having a double lockup into the first corner. As Liam Lawson, we're looking at in the, I don't know what type of livery you'd call it, the butter livery, mustard livery, I don't know. But it's absolutely terrible, the livery. He's on his first flying lap. His teammate, Lindblad, is up in 11th place. As he now enters the back straight. And now I can move Sergio Perez's name. So yeah, Sergio Perez is currently in 14th. Lance Stroll is in 15th. And then it's Carlos Sainz 16th. Bottas 17th. And then the 2 Alpines of Gasly and Colapinto. Albon, Bortoleto and Lawson haven't done a lap time yet. Bortoleto still in the pits. As Liam Lawson goes 6th with a 1:29.9. That is a very good lap time from the Kiwi. Very good lap time. Puts him right in the mix. And really, I'd say already probably gets him into Q2. Alex Albon, very good improvement for him. Up to P10. As we're now looking at Nico Hülkenberg, who's now on soft compound tyres. The only man out there for Audi, Bortoleto, I think, has got an issue. I did hear Bortoleto, or it looks like, have they got Bortoleto ready? Looks like he's almost ready. Bortoleto, I don't know if he got disqualified from the sprint race, but I heard that he was potentially going to be disqualified because of some infringement with his car. So I'm wondering if it's related to that. Carlos Sainz goes up to 12th. And Nico Hülkenberg goes 7th. That is a superb lap. Only half a second slower than Verstappen. That's brilliant. From Hulk. As Oliver Behrman has just gone 4th. So some big improvements here. As Lance Stroll, I've just seen, has gone up to 17th, ahead of Sergio Perez. So both Cadillacs, currently both behind both Aston Martins, which is surprising. Here comes Pierre Gasly. Only 12th, but currently he is on his way. And Colapinto goes quicker. Once again, Colapinto, at least in qualifying trim, faster than Gasly, which is very surprising. We never normally see that. As Isaac Hadjar improves up to 7th place. As they're just showing Leclerc's wife, Alexandra, I think it is. As Leclerc slows right down as he comes up to the start-finish line. As, yeah, they're trying to get Bortoletto's car ready. Some sort of issue, clearly. Hopefully he can get out there, because Audi should be easily quick enough to get both cars into Q2, and Bortoletto will not want to start at the back of the grid. But currently, 5 minutes to go in Q1, and in the drop zone, it is Lindblad, Alonso, Stroll, Perez, Bottas. So, really, as expected. And then, obviously, Bortoletto got the back, but Bortoletto hasn't done a lap time. If Bortoletto was to get himself out of the drop zone, though, Esteban Ocon would drop in, which would be a bit of a surprise, because, yeah, Haas should be a lot quicker than that. I mean, and not only that, Oliver Behrman has just done a lap time almost 1 second quicker than Ocon. So Ocon should be comfortably getting into Q2. And yeah, what a lap that is, by the way, from Behrman. 1:29.3. That is a stunner. Maybe Haas have found the pace that I was expecting, because that's a lot more like it. As Russell being told on the radio, we need to do this stuff. I'm sure it's obvious to you. Yeah, Russell currently in 12th place. And yeah, it would be nice for him just to get another lap in, maybe boost confidence a bit. Russell is not that far, actually, ahead of the drop zone. He's only probably about 3/10 ahead. So yeah, he needs to make sure he improves. As the driver just 1 position ahead of him, Oscar Piastri, is now on a new lap, as Bortoletto has left the garage. So Bortoletto hopefully can get himself into Q2. As Oscar Piastri braking hard for turn 11. And the McLaren looking pretty good through these slower speed corners. Russell does a pretty good first sector, quicker than what Max Verstappen has done. Verstappen's had a great Q1. He's only had to do that 1 lap, and he's still in the pits. So, yeah, Max has had a fantastic Q1. As Antonelli is just in a purple first sector. And here comes Oscar Piastri exiting the final corner to the line. Surely he's going to get into Q2. And, well, he stays 11th. It doesn't improve. Might get a bit close here for Piastri. That's disappointing that he didn't improve. As Antonelli, 1/4 of a second up on Max Verstappen after 2 sectors. Here is, though, his teammate George Russell, who improves up to 7th. So that is good enough for Russell. He is into Q2. Is Kimi Antonelli, does a 1:28.6. Half a second almost quicker than Verstappen. And Antonelli is now fastest. But we are focused on the battle to get into Q2. And realistically, it's Bortoletto and Lindblad we're looking at, who's in the drop zone, as to whether they can get themselves through. As we're looking here at Bortoletto, who is slowly going along down the back straight. Don't know if he's just doing that to give himself space, or now there's going to be quite a traffic jam coming up into this final corner. And I think he's just backing up to give himself space, as Bortoletto. And yeah, he now comes around the final corner, obviously goes slow before he can punch in that battery over the finish line, and now gets going. Can Gabriel Bortoletto do a good enough lap? He needs to do, if he can try and do a 1:30.0 or better, then that should be good enough, just about to get him in. as a black and white flag for Colapinto for failing to follow the race director instructions. Not quite sure exactly what Colapinto's done, but I don't think he'll get a penalty. As, Bortoleto absolutely miles off the pace of Ocon through the first sector. So I think Bortoleto is finished. 8/10 off Ocon in the first sector. There must be some power-related issue in that Audi for him to be that far off, as Colapinto goes up to 8th. Well, not anymore, because Isaac Hadjar is up to 4th. As the checkered flag has fallen, these are your final laps, as Liam Lawson is up to P10. Leclerc goes 2nd. As Oscar Piastri, by the way, has dropped now to 15th. Piastri is in big trouble. Now Piastri's in 16th. As Bortoleto stays 22nd, clearly had a power issue. Lindblad stays in 17th, and I think Piastri, by a 10th of a second, is going to get away with it here. As Alonso pits, clearly couldn't improve anymore in his lap time. Lance Stroll stays in 19th. Perez stays in 20th. As Piastri, well, is on another lap, so maybe he was always going to get through. Let's see. And no, Piastri stays in 16th. So yeah, Piastri gets through. We've still got Valtteri Bottas, who gets ahead of his teammate Sergio Perez. So Bottas does outqualify teammate Perez, but both Aston Martins getting ahead of the Cadillacs, which is a surprise. Piastri, though, very lucky to get through there. That could have been an absolute disaster for the team, as Carlos Sainz actually in the end ended up getting into the top 10 with a lap, and Albon ended up in 13th. So there you go. That is Q1 over and done with. And let's go through who is through to Q2. Antonelli, Leclerc, Verstappen, Norris, Hadjar, Behrman, Hamilton, Russell, Sainz, Colapinto, Lawson, Hulkenberg, Albon, Ocon, Gasly, and Oscar Piastri, just about by a couple tenths, gets into Q2. And knocked out in Q1, Arvid Lindblad, Fernando Alonso, Lance Stroll, Valtteri Bottas, Sergio Perez, and Gabriel Bortoleto. And talking of Bortoleto, on the way back to the pits, his car, it looks like, I don't know if it's the engine or the left rear brake is on fire, and he's slowly touring down the back straight. As F1 now go to not F1, but Sky now go to an ad break, so I can't tell you if he's stopped on track or not, but he's trying to slowly get back to the pits. But yeah, Bortoleto clearly had some sort of issue there, because he was 5 seconds off with his lap time. He did like a 1:33 or something, which is miles off the pace compared to where he needed to be. So Bortoleto will start the race at the very back, which is unfortunate for him. The only positive I can say from Q1 is that Aston Martin are going to be higher on the grid than expected, 18th and 19th, but still they are miles off the pace. But that's Q1 done with. Now it is time for Q2. And in this Q2, we'll be knocking out the next 6 slowest drivers from 11th to 16th. And it's a 15-minute long session. I'll sync up the timer at the 14-minute mark when that comes in a couple minutes' time. G-Walker saying rear left wheel on fire. Yeah, it was maybe something to do with the wheel, the brake. I'm not sure if it's an engine thing. I think it looks more like maybe the brake. It is very hot in Miami, so overheating is not exactly a surprise that that's an issue. But just one car left in the game for Audi. In terms of Arvid Lindblad being eliminated, it's not a surprise. Racing Bulls have been the only teams Racing Bulls have been quicker than this weekend is Cadillac and Aston Martin, really. So, yeah, not a surprise. And also, we need to remember, I know Lawson had a decent session, ended up in 11th, but Lindblad has never raced at this track before, so yeah, let's give Lindblad a break. As Bortoletto did have to pull over, thankfully pulled over where there was a gap in the wall and the car could be pulled back behind the gap, so I don't think there is going to be, hopefully, any delay to the start Q2. As now we await the start of the second part of qualifying, and this is where things should really spice up. Will we get a surprise elimination in there? Maybe. And unfortunately, they say the start of Q2 will be delayed to clear, I'm guessing, Bortoletto's car, but I really don't think it should be delayed because, yeah, he parked next to a gap in the wall, so I don't really see why we're having a delay here. One thing I've got to say, and I know, the man running Formula One, Stefano Domenicali, who I absolutely despise, quite frankly, for the bullshit he spews. This goes against everything that he says, and claims that all these American races are all sold out and all this rubbish. The main grandstand on the pit straight is half empty. So, clearly not much of a fuck is given there. I mean, I'm sure other parts of the track has got some fans, but yeah. And obviously F1 with some very clever camera shots, making sure not to show the empty seats on the main grandstand and probably the empty seats elsewhere. There was a point someone made on Twitter, which is really just bang on the money, that the reason it feels like there's so many people who attend this race on the Sunday, especially on the grid, is because, and I don't know if this is an American thing. I do to a degree think it is, but there are so many people that purely just want to be seen at the Grand Prix rather than actually come to watch the Grand Prix. So a lot of these influencers and people, celebrities, you see it, like I said, I don't think they give a flying fuck about Formula One and, the race or anything like that. I think it's purely, oh, look, I'm here at this event. Again, it feels like a very American thing because you see it in other sports where you'll get like the odd celebrity at the front row of a basketball game, or like on the sideline of an NFL game. Again, it's purely just, oh, look, I'm here, which for some reason, America loves that stuff. I don't get it. Like, I've never once thought, yeah, I'm going to watch this sporting event because this celebrity's there. Like, no. Totally irrelevant. But again, America is just an insane place, quite frankly. No offense to any Americans. Ewok says complimentary tickets. Yeah, kind of, yeah. I think Formula One, I wouldn't say amplify that type of experience, but they really help those people who just want to be seen at the Grand Prix. They really help them in that aspect, because Formula One, they want you to think that because all of these big names are at this Grand Prix, that it must be some like massive event. But again, unless those celebrities are actually involved in the event itself in terms of the race or whatever, then I just don't see how I just don't see how that brings viewers in. I don't Who out there actually decides to watch like a basketball or NFL game because a celebrity's there? Like, I just don't understand the metrics there. I don't think there is metrics really to support it. Like, I get it for like the Super Bowl, when you've got like the Super Bowl halftime show. If someone wants to tune in and see their favorite artist perform, I get that. But I don't believe there is a audience of people out there that tune into sporting events purely because a celebrity they like is going to be there. Like, I really don't think that makes sense. And I think, you know, the people, Formula One's not the only, say, organization that does this, but they'll parade celebrities around to make it feel like it's a really special big event. But that doesn't actually draw in more viewers. Unless, like I said, they're actually involved in the event itself. So, yeah, I don't get it. As Q2, thankfully, is underway. We're about 30 seconds in. I'll sync up the timer in about 20 odd seconds. As the first car on track is Isaac Hadjar, who is followed not too far down the road by Max Verstappen. Verstappen had a fantastic Q1. Let's see what lap time he can do here in Q2. I would imagine it's going to be much quicker lap times we see in this part of the session. So there you go, 14 minutes to go in Q2. Yeah, I think we're going to see lap times probably in the late 127s, maybe the very early 128s. So anywhere between a 127.8 and a 128.1 is what I think the fastest lap time will be. The fastest lap time in Q1 was 128.6, which was probably about a tenth quicker than the fastest time I expected. So let's see what Red Bull can do here. If Max Verstappen can do like a 127.8 or a 127.9, then that really puts him in the conversation for pole position. But I'd be very surprised if he can do that, because I don't think this Red Bull is quite quick enough for that. But in the hands of Max Verstappen, anything is possible. We have learnt that lesson multiple times in the last few years. As Verstappen starts his first lap in Q2. Struggled at the apex of turn 1, so that will cost him probably a couple tenths. And he comes flying now through turn 5 and 6. And overtakes Racing Bull car there. And the first sector is a 30.3. Which is, yeah, not very quick. It's not slow, but it's not anything to shout about, put it that way. And Verstappen sliding wide a tad at turn 12 there. As he comes through all those little bitty slow corners. And now enters the back straight. And he has just one corner pretty much between him and the finish line. He comes into the hairpin, bit blocked to a small extent by the car ahead, but he gets past that car, comes to the line, and does a 1:28.9. He says, mate, these tyres are terrible. They have no grip. And yeah, that was not a good lap time. He only improved by 1/10.5 compared to his Q1 time. So yeah, that was not good at all. As Hulkenberg goes third with a 1:29.9. To get into Q3, you are probably going to need to do probably a late 1:28. So, yeah, both Verstappen and Hadjar have done a 1:28.9. So, I think, yeah, about that. Maybe 29.0, 29.1 at slowest. As Leclerc goes quickest, 1:28.5. Lewis Hamilton goes quickest. First real show of pace from the 7 times champion. 1:28.4. That's a decent lap. As that's Lando Norris having a moment through the first sector and having to abort the lap. He's caught too much curb on the entrance to turn 6. Here's his teammate Oscar Piastri. Who looks pretty decent through those slow speed corners. Only a 10th off Hamilton after the first 2 sectors as Pierre Gasly goes 5th, but is immediately replaced by Colapinto in 5th. Colapinto, once again, quicker than Gasly. So 5th and 6th for Alpine. Lawson is up to 7th. As here comes Piastri, who goes 3rd, 4/10 off Hamilton, which is, yeah, quite the surprise. As Antonelli now does a 1:28.3. That's a pretty good time there from Antonelli. That's only 3/10 slower than he went in sprint qualifying yesterday. As Russell goes 3rd and a 10th behind. So Mercedes showing much stronger pace. So it's Antonelli quickest, and then Hamilton, Russell, Leclerc, Piastri, Verstappen, Hadjar, Colapinto, Gasly, Lawson. That's your top 10. As Lando Norris has come in and put a new set of tyres on and is now coming out. And then in 11th, you've got Esteban Ocon, 12th Hulkenberg, 13th Behrman, Albon 14th, Sainz 15th, and Lando Norris hasn't done a lap time and he is in 16th place. Looney Class is saying there are metrics for celebrity appearances. Taylor Swift fans increase viewership for youth games. I do think she's an outlier though, because she is such a massive star, which I don't personally understand why, because I don't think she's, that great. That's just my personal opinion. Whether you disagree or not is your choice. But the numbers don't lie. She is an absolute megastar. So she is a bit of an outlier in that aspect. But I think that's the problem, though, is they look at those numbers from those outliers and think they can replicate it if they, invite a load of celebrities who are popular, but less, still not anywhere close popular to like Taylor Swift or someone like that. So, yeah. But I still, again, don't understand the mentality of I'm going to watch a sporting event because this person is there. Again, unless it's for like either a mega star or they are actually involved in some way in the event. Like I said, a halftime show or, instances like that. But There you go. As Lando Norris starts his he'll hope his final run of Q2. He needs to do, say, a one or late 128. So if he can put this lap, if he can put it in terms of lap time, if he can put it between his teammate and Verstappen in 6th, say, then that should be good enough for him to get into Q3. As he's done a pretty good first sector, at least compared to Liam Lawson. 6/10 quicker. And yeah, Norris completing the middle sector, now 3/4 of a second up. So yeah, Norris is going to go probably at best 5th, but as long as he does what it looks like it's going to be probably a 128.8. If he can do that, then that should easily be good enough to get him in. And actually a bit slower, 129.0. Lost a bit of time there in the final sector, but still, that probably will be good enough. So, Lando Norris up to 9th. And Norris into, surely, Q3. And really, looking at the top 10, I don't think anyone is going to break into that top 10. Because both Alpines are way too quick. And then the top 4 teams are all way too quick. So, yeah, in terms of making the top 10, I think we've already settled that. But you never know. We've had surprises before, many in qualifying, as we've got 4.5 minutes to go in Q2. Liam Lawson, though, who has had a pretty good season, if he can finish in 11th, that would be, I think, a pretty good result for him. Because I don't think really he can do any better than that. As Lando saying on the radio, why do I have no deployment out of turn 16? And McLaren said the deployment looks correct. I think it's more the wind. Maybe that's why he was not so quick in the final sector, because different conditions for him compared to the others. As we see, I think Charles Leclerc just slowly coming out of the exit of the pit lane. And then we see Frederick Vasseur on the Ferrari pit wall. Ferrari potentially have cooked up a car that could legitimately be a championship contender. And ultimately for Vasseur, that's what he is going to be judged on, is can he provide the goods for the drivers to then achieve something that they haven't achieved at Ferrari for nearly 20 years now. Remember 18 18 years ago it was when the Ferrari last won a championship in 2008, when they won the Constructors' Championship. Closest they've come to breaking that drought was either Alonso in 2012 on the driver's side, or you could say 2024 on the constructor's side. As Antonelli on a new lap coming through the first sector, Antonelli currently in P1. Can the young Italian, the championship leader, can he lay down a marker for Q3? He's done a purple first sector. If he can do a 127 lap time right here, then he's looking great for Q3. As now he comes through. Turn 14, 15, 16. Pretty much a triple chicane, that. And slightly slower he is compared to his personal best through the middle sector. So if he does improve this lap, it might only be by a few hundredths of a second, as Russell has done a purple middle sector, but is half a second off his teammate overall. So the first sector must have been quite poor for Russell. Can Antonelli improve? He does by half a tenth, and he gets down to a 128.2. Here comes his teammate, George Russell. He does not improve. About 4.5 tenths slower than his personal best that lap time. As we're looking at Carlos Sainz on a lap, currently 3 tenths down after the first 2 sectors on Pierre Gasly. This lap is going to put Sainz probably in 11th. So, yeah, Sainz, no surprise, is not going to make Q3. The Williams is nowhere near quick enough to get into Q3. They are miles away from where they should be. As Sainz does go up to 11th, but I'd be surprised if he stays there. As Max Verstappen, by the way, has just done a purple middle sector. Comes out the final corner. Verstappen to the line. A 128.1. Verstappen showing some brilliant pace. Here comes Charles Leclerc. He goes third, 2 tenths behind Verstappen. Here comes Nico Hülkenberg, currently 14th. He goes 11th. 3 tenths, by the way, away from the Alpine and Gasly. That Alpine is miles quicker. Lawson goes 12th. So Lawson out-qualified by the Audi of Hülkenberg. Here comes Piastri. Goes 4th. Lewis Hamilton hasn't improved any of his sectors, and he comes to the line, and yeah, he hasn't improved at all. Lando Norris has done a personal best middle sector. What can he do? He only goes up to 7th, so needs to find something for Q3. Well, quite a bit for Q3. Here comes Oliver Behrman, currently in 15th. Where can he go? 13th. At least he out-qualifies his teammate, I guess. And Alex Albon stays in 16th. So 14th and 16th for Williams. Williams, by the way, remember, finished 5th at this race last year. How times have changed. But yeah, as I said, the top 5 teams clearly currently in Formula 1, all making their way through. So let's go through the drivers now that Q2 is over. Let's go through the drivers who have made their way to the top 10 shootout. Max Verstappen, Kimi Antonelli, Charles Leclerc, Oscar Piastri, Lewis Hamilton, George Russell, Lando Norris, Isaac Hadjar, Franco Colapinto, and Pierre Gasly. And knocked out in Q2, Nico Hülkenberg, Liam Lawson, Oliver Behrman, Carlos Sainz, Esteban Ocon, and Alex Albon. And yeah, it's all about Q3 now. And has Max Verstappen laid down a marker? Is Max Verstappen in the fight for pole position? And if he can get pole here, then quite possibly, if he is to have a championship challenge this year, it could start very much right here in Miami. Or can the others show that they are faster than the Red Bull, which I still expect? It would be very much a big surprise if Max got pole. But let me quickly finish up the poll that's ran in the chat for the last couple hours. I asked you guys who will take pole position for the Miami Grand Prix. 81 votes. And just about with 40% of the vote, Charles Leclerc wins it. Lando Norris, second, 37%. Antonelli, 17%. And Russell on 6%. I agree. I think Leclerc will take pole, but it is looking like it could really be anyone in the top 5 or 6. It really is up for grabs. And that's exactly what we want. That's what we demand, really. And that's what we're getting. Ewok saying if Verstappen can get pole here, ... Yeah. If he gets pole in this session, I don't want to hear from anyone about whether Max Verstappen is or is not the best driver on the grid. And quite frankly, the best driver in the world. If he gets pole here, then it's just example 1 million, case 1020, whatever you want to call it, that Max Verstappen is the best. But surely not. Surely he can't do it. But how many times have we said that? We've said that, there was quite a few times last season we said, nah, Verstappen can't do it. And he goes and does it. So, we will see. I think the scariest thing for his rivals is that Max now feels comfortable in the car. When Max feels comfortable in the car he's driving, even if it's not the quickest, that is something to be in fear of, because once the absolute greats like your Verstappens and Hamiltons and Schumachers and Sennas, when they feel comfortable with what they've got, the potential of what they can do is endless. It really is. So, ultimately we will find out. I mean, at last year's Grand Prix, he somehow got pole. Still don't know how. And not only that, he got pole in what was probably, the third fastest car. So, again, nothing with Max Verstappen is impossible. But Q3 should be underway in a couple minutes from now, and we will find out who will take pole position for the Miami Grand Prix. That's all the drivers in the garages, cooling off, looking through the telemetry, and awaiting the chance to get right back out there. Looney says, Charles used to make pole in bad Ferrari cars. Did that make him the best? No. I mean, yeah, there's drivers, right now on the grid who have been able to get pole positions in cars that weren't the quickest car. But I think with Max, what makes him the best is that he's been able to do it more times, especially in the last couple of years where the Red Bull clearly has not been the best car. Max has just so many times been able to go and get pole and even win races that you just think, really he shouldn't be winning. If you look at last year, McLaren really should have dominated last year. Their car was, comfortably the best car. But again, time and time again, Verstappen somehow, some way ended up winning. I think he ended up with more race wins that year than both McLaren drivers. Was it more race wins or more pole positions? One of the two. That just should not have been possible. Leclerc, he's also amazing, obviously, in qualifying, and he has also got pole in, Ferrari cars that shouldn't have quite been on pole. And, Russell, you can throw in that category as well. But as of the last couple years, at least, Max is just amazing at being able to do that. As Q3 has begun, we are about 45 seconds in. I will sync up the timer in about 10 seconds. Currently, we don't have any cars on the track. And there you go. 12 minutes to go in qualifying. As outcome, the two McLarens. McLaren have never taken pole position in Miami. Can they do so in this next 12 minutes? as they are followed by the 2 Red Bulls and then the 2 Ferrari cars. Ferrari have took pole here before. Like I said, in the first edition of the Miami Grand Prix in 2022, they locked out the front row that weekend. Still ended up losing. Mercedes have never had pole for the actual race. Obviously, Antonelli did take sprint pole last year, but that was for the sprint. And then Red Bull have had pole position here 3 times. They've been by far the most successful team at this Grand Prix. As we look at Lando Norris. Just coming into the middle sector. Now we're looking at Max Verstappen. I think an even scarier prospect as well for Verstappen is, even though, yeah, he's been frustrated at these cars and just frustrated in general. Obviously, you know, we've seen that Max doesn't crack under pressure really at all. He responds as well to pressure as really, or arguably, as well as anyone we've seen. But Max Verstappen with no pressure on his shoulders is, again, an even scarier prospect. Because it's not like he's expected to be on the front row or on pole because he's in a championship fight. Again, there's no pressure, no real expectation. So we'll see what he can do. But here comes last year's Miami Grand Prix winner, Oscar Piastri. Can he take his first pole position of 2026? Through turn 1 he goes. Looking good. Remember, again, pole position in sprint qualifying yesterday was 1:27.8. Will they match that? Go quicker than that? We'll see. I still think the absolute best they can do is a low 1:27. But we'll see if they can actually do that. The best time in Q2 was a 1:28.1, so they would need to improve by quite a bit. As Piastri does a purple first sector, but it's not that quick. Definitely can be, I think, improved upon. Saying that, it is quicker than what Lando Norris has just done. As Max Verstappen goes, I think slightly, well, not slightly, I think it's at least a 10th slower. So this is a good lap so far for Piastri, at least compared to Norris, his teammate, and Max Verstappen. Norris, though, responds with a purple middle sector as the Australian exits the final corner to the line. What's his first attempt at pole like? It's a 1:28.6. That is surprisingly quite slow. Here comes Lando Norris. Is it better? Yes, it is, by half a second. Lando Norris, 1:28.1. Max Verstappen, though, has done a purple middle sector. What can he do as Isaac Hadjar goes behind the 2 McLarens? Here comes Verstappen. He goes quickest by 0.02 of a second. How on earth has he got ahead of both McLarens there? Here comes Leclerc. He goes quickest by 0.04 of a second. What a lap by Leclerc. Antonelli, though, has done a purple first sector as Lewis Hamilton, 0.3 off and only 4th. Splits the McLarens at least, but Antonelli is a 10.5 up on Leclerc after the first 2 sectors, as Gasly goes 7th behind Hadjar. Here comes the championship leader, the youngest championship leader in F1 history, as Colapinto goes 6th, and Antonelli by 3.5 is on to provisional pole, 1:27.7. What a lap by the young Italian. George Russell, 0.4 away. That's a massive gap, and he's only 5th. And there you go. That is your top 10 after the first runs. Antonelli, 3.5 tenths quicker than Leclerc. What a lap. And, well, can anyone get near that? I still think they can. I mean, McLaren definitely can, because they did a 128 or 127.8 in sprint qualifying, so they can definitely get at least a lot closer to that. But that is a brilliant first attempt at pole by Kimi Antonelli. By the way, shout out Franco Colapinto, currently splitting the McLaren of Piastri and the Red Bull of Isaac Hadjar. But the top 10 with just under 6 minutes left in qualifying, it is Antonelli on pole, Leclerc second, Verstappen third, Norris fourth, Russell 4 tenths slower than Antonelli in fifth. Not sure what's going wrong for Russell, but that is very poor for him to be that far off. Lewis Hamilton 6th, Piastri 7th, Colapinto 8th, Hadjar 9th, and Pierre Gasly once again slower than Colapinto and in 10th. By the way, the gap between Leclerc in 2nd and Russell in 5th is only 0.054 of a second. So half a tenth separates 2nd from 5th on the grid. But that is only the first attempt. There is still one more chance for all 10 drivers to improve their lap time. And I still think McLaren, I still think they can improve quite a bit on what they've done. And if they can, I think Ferrari can as well. For Max Verstappen, 3rd, currently on the grid, what a result that would be. If he stays there, I think he would be pretty satisfied with that. But again, Ferrari and McLaren, I think surely have got more in the bag. And can at least close the gap. Whether they can go quicker than Antonelli is another story. Antonelli has been an absolute beast in qualifying this year, except for, of course, the first Grand Prix. As the two McLarens come out the garage, so do the two Mercedes and the two Ferraris. Just under 3.5 minutes to go. These are now going to be your final runs. And also, one thing to mention is if the race tomorrow cannot be held, or if we get a Spa 2021 type situation, which people have talked about because there is a lot of rain forecast and obviously thunder as well, which again in America, you can't do any outdoor events when there's thunder and lightning in the area. If for whatever reason the race doesn't really happen tomorrow, if we only get like a few laps behind a safety car, pole position could end up being pretty much the race win. So it could really win the weekend if the worst case scenario weather-wise does happen tomorrow. As we're looking on board at Charles Leclerc, he's just slowly coming through the first sector. He's going to be finishing his lap quite a bit later by the looks of it than others, as Max Verstappen is only just coming out of the garage. Quite late, I must say. There's only just over 2 minutes left. I mean, he'll be fine to get round to start a lap, but he's going to have to get round and he's going to have to do his out lap a bit probably quicker than he would have wanted. As Anthony's saying, boy, that was close on the radio as his teammate just quickly nipped by in the fast lane of the pit lane. Anyway, here is the Mercedes of George Russell. surely he cannot end up 4/10 slower than his teammate. Antonelli is a special driver, but Russell, we know, has a lot more potential than that. And let's see what he can do. George Russell starts his final lap and final attempt to get on terms at least with teammate Antonelli. As Antonelli, I think, has messed up the first corner. He has. Antonelli's backed off, so Antonelli is done. Yeah, Antonelli messed up turn 1. As Russell, 1/2 a tenth off Antonelli through the first sector. What's Piastri's first sector like? 1/2 a second off. Piastri's also made a mistake somewhere. So Piastri is out of play when it comes to the pole position fight. And that can be very costly for Piastri. He's currently only in 7th. Norris also has not done a good first sector. I don't know what Leclerc's first sector's been like. As Russell, just under 2/10 off the pace of his teammate after the first 2 sectors. Can Russell at least get onto the front row? As Piastri now does a purple middle sector. He's trying his best to do a damage limitations. Oh, Leclerc loses the rear end massively through turn 11 and 12 as Russell stays 5th. He has a terrible final sector. Poor, very poor qualifying from Russell as here comes Oscar Piastri. Stays in 7th. That's a poor session from him. Should have done a lot better. Lando Norris stays in 4th. 4th and 7th for McLaren. They will be very disappointed with that. What can Leclerc do despite that error at turn 12? Stays in 2nd. If he can stay there, I think he'll be happy with that. Here comes Lewis Hamilton. Stays in 6th. Max Verstappen is the only one who can make something of this final lap. Everyone else has done a poor final run. What can Verstappen do? He does a purple middle sector. And he's only 800s off. Surely not. Surely he cannot get pole. As his massive rear wing opens down to the hairpin. Through the hairpin he comes. Can he do the unthinkable? Max Verstappen to the line. Oh no, by 1/10.5 he misses out and he goes 2nd. What a performance by Verstappen, but ultimately it is your championship leader who ultimately his first run was way too good. And the championship leader, Kimi Antonelli, will start the Miami Grand Prix on pole. But in 2nd will be Max Verstappen, who, even though he didn't get pole, proves once again why he is the best. How on earth has he done that? How has he put that car on the front row? 5 weeks ago, he was struggling in 8th, 9th place, fighting Alpines, and now he's on the front row of the grid for the Miami Grand Prix. That's why he's the best. Leclerc 3rd. Leclerc, I think, will still be satisfied. That's still a decent result. Lando Norris 4th. McLaren will be very disappointed. Russell 5th. Russell, very poor performance. He has got to sort himself out. Hamilton 6th. Poor again from him. Piastri 7th. Poor from him. Colapinto 8th. What a result. I think that might be his best ever qualifying result for the Argentine. Isaac Hadjar 9th, Pierre Gasly 10th, and the rest of your grid will be Hulkenberg 11th, Lawson 12th, Behrman 13th, Sainz 14th, Ocon 15th, Albon 16th, and then Lindblad, Alonso, Stroll, Bottas, Perez, and Bortoletto. That is your grid for the 2026 Miami Grand Prix. And I will start up a poll for asking you guys who is driver of the day, but I mean, there can only surely be one winner. if he had got pole there, I would have absolutely lost my shit if he had got pole. But let me just give you the driver of the day options. So yeah, Antonelli, Verstappen, I'll put Leclerc in there. I think Leclerc's had a good day. And then Colapinto definitely deserves to be in the driver of the day shout. But ultimately, yeah, Max Verstappen is by far driver of the day. How is he second on the grid? How? Even with the improvements they've made, I still thought maybe at best he can get himself on the third row, but he is on the front row for tomorrow's Grand Prix. And if he gets a great start, you never know. He could end up somehow winning the Miami Grand Prix. I just don't know how he does it. And he, that's a feeling that is felt up and down the paddock. They just don't know how he somehow drags his way into those positions. But for Antonelli, this is brilliant for his championship, for him to be on pole. The only problem is these awful starts that he keeps getting. Got to sort them out, because pace-wise, he has got the pace easily to be winning these races and very much taking the initiative in this World Championship fight. And if Antonelli can get away into the lead in turn one, and I don't see why Antonelli won't win tomorrow's race and take what would be his third win in a row, and would further extend his championship lead. And if he can get away in P1, it'd be great for him, because obviously his teammate is down in 5th, and he's going to have a right battle on his hands, even just to get on the podium. But on the flip side, it is great for Max that he's in 2nd, and also for Leclerc that he's in 3rd, because if Antonelli once again gets a terrible start, they're right in the, in the position to capitalize and potentially go and take full advantage to then go win the race. Sarah Garrett saying, solid Saturday that they're fixing the qualifying, to be fair. Yeah, that as a qualifying session, that felt a lot more like it should be. But I'll let you guys vote on the poll quickly, and I'll just read some comments out before I head off. Just a reminder again, I will not be doing a race watch along tomorrow, but I will be doing a podcast on Monday reviewing the race. So make sure to come and check that podcast out and let me know in the comments in that podcast whatever your thoughts are in regards to what happens in the race. Hopefully it's a better race than I'm expecting, but I just think it'll be either it will be a wet race, but we'll get loads of delays, which will make it painful to pay attention to, or it'll be a dry race if they move it forward a few hours, which will mean that it'll be a mostly a procession, because a dry race in Miami is, a terrible experience. Let me just scroll up to see what you guys are saying. Crystal saying, why is Woody... I love that name. 4/10 slower than Kimi. Answer, he was never that guy, and ground effects made him look better than he really is. You can believe that if you want, but I don't think that's the case. I think what is happening, maybe some people will say this was always going to happen because they always believed that he was never that guy. But, being consistently, really quick in qualifying and getting great results in qualifying is a lot easier when you don't have championship pressure on your shoulders. And that is, that was always the question with George Russell is how will he respond? How will he perform when he's fighting for a championship? And currently he is performing quite a bit below standard. I wouldn't say well below, because we have to remember Antonelli is a very good driver. He's a special talent, but Russell should be a tenth or so away, really. Russell should be at least third on the grid. There is no excuse for him to be on the third row of the grid in, when his teammate's on pole. Just no way. No way at all should that be happening. And I don't want to hear any complaints from him or his fans that, they changed the regulations and all the competition's closed up. Bullshit. Do your job first, then worry about the rest. Hello to Todd, who says he's trying to do the Max Verstappen chant or song. Thank you, Ewok. Have a good rest of your weekend. And Rook's there just posting a quote from Verstappen saying, the upgrades have made me feel more comfortable, so I can push more. The upgrades are working. To be on the front row is way better than I expected heading into the weekend. Like I said earlier, when a driver at the level of Max Verstappen feels comfortable, that's a scary prospect, because the possibilities are endless with an all-time great level talent and this driver in general. But let me finish up the poll in the chat, as we've had 13 votes, which is obviously not a great number to fall on. But I believe we have just about a clear winner. I'll wait for it to appear in the chat. When it does, and well, not yet. There you go. I asked you guys who your driver of the day is for qualifying in Miami. 46% of the vote goes to Verstappen, and yeah, definitely driver of the day. Antonelli, 38% of the vote. Antonelli absolutely deserves a shout out, though. He produced a brilliant lap in that first run, and ultimately he was too good for the others to beat. And then Leclerc on 8% and Colapinto on 8%. Guys, thank you very much for coming onto this stream. Of course, this is the first stream I've done in 5 weeks, and obviously it's the first Grand Prix we've had in 5 weeks. Hopefully we don't have such a big gap again. Yeah, so thank you for coming along for this stream. Been great to have you. Again, I won't be doing a race watch along, but I will be back on Monday with a podcast episode reviewing whatever happens in the race tomorrow in Miami. And a reminder from what I said earlier, unfortunately, there will not be any content on the channel between this Grand Prix and the next one in Canada in 3 weeks, because I've got a lot of important uni stuff to get on with. But in the next Grand Prix in Canada, I will be doing both a qualifying and race watch-along. So the race watch-alongs will return at the next race in Canada. So make sure to join me for that. Race weekend. Montreal is always one of the best race weekends of the season, so can't wait for that, especially with how close the field is now between the front 4 teams. So make sure, like I said, to join me for that. But yeah, thank you for coming along. Thank you for smashing the like button. Make sure to subscribe before you go if you haven't. And make sure to smash the like button as well if you haven't. Make sure, let's try and get as many likes as we can on the stream as possible. But yeah, hope you guys had a good time. Hope you guys enjoyed as well the stream and enjoyed the session. And hopefully you will enjoy tomorrow's Grand Prix. And, you know, enjoy the rest of your weekend as well. Hope you have a good rest of your weekend. Obviously, if you're in the UK, it's a bank holiday weekend. So, yeah, have a good rest of your weekend, guys. And I'll see you on Monday for the podcast reviewing this Grand Prix. And until then, and until the next Grand Prix, where I'll be live next on Saturday, May 23rd. Until then, guys, it has been me, Chazza HD. Goodbye.